Into it. So yesterday we got to start on a UI or like reproducing cloning Slack. So we've got kind of this column going on here and basically the like general shell of the app together. So these are full height. They'll scale with the browser window or whatever. Um, and after I cut the stream last night, I realized there's some stuff I started on and got distracted and kind of skipped over. So we started last night talking about like layouts. So we're going to have an application layout and then we're going to have like an empty layout, right? So what I want to do is kind of revisit that real quick. So here we had like, let's say like basically all of this content. We're going to end up putting in our application view. But to start, what we want to do is say something like, basically want to be able to dynamically switch which layout we're using. So we can use a view component called component to do that. So you set it up here, and then the way this function is, it has an is prop that whatever component name you pass it, that's what it'll show. Okay, so what we need to do first is import our application and empty components. So we can import application from layouts application, and then we'll do the same thing for empty. So now these are good. Now I can come up here and we can reference this ref that we created. So we'll say it is layout. So by default it should be application. We'll have to figure out why it's not doing that. Oh, we didn't register our components here, so we probably got like an error or something, maybe. No console error, but that's what we need to do. So here we can say register that, and now it shows up. So we have application layout, and if I change this to empty, it would load the empty layout. So this is as far as we're going to go right now, but what we want to eventually get to is when we bring in view router, we'll be able to specify in the meta object of the route, like each route config, which layout you want to use. So by default, we'll probably roll with application. So if you don't specify anything, you application. But like for our login route, we would say, okay, well that's an empty because we want to basically fill that entire space. So for now, I'm gonna leave this application, and then everything we cut out of the root app component, I'm gonna put inside of this template, and then we'll work from there. So we'll cut. Component is layout. I messed up my Control Z buffer, so we gotta go redo all this real quick. All right. Application layout. There we go. So we're back now. Failed to resolve component icon. So we need to move this icon registration into the application layout, which makes sense. All right. So now it's all back, or it should be. All right. So now we can kind of keep on from where we left off last night. So one thing that kind of got us hung up a little bit, or got me hung up a little bit last night, was trying to do too close of a match to Slack. And what we noticed is a lot of our spacing scales and all that kind of matched up with what we saw in Slack. And I kind of use that as like, we spent a lot of time kind of demonstrating the benefit of something like Tailwind in that regard, and Tonight, I'm not going to focus so much on that, and we're just going to keep on rolling, or at least try to. So, let's go look at the project board real quick. I know tonight I want to get the font our web font pulled in at the very least. Well, we'll do a lot more than that, but we're going to get this font pulled in first, I think. And then we'll focus on this task. So we're going to hit our header, the channel view. So like this messages list and the chat box and all that kind of stuff. And then what was the last thing? Add channels list item. So we just have an extra item we need to put down here, which will be easy enough. So let's do our Google fonts first. So open up application view. We're going to need to modify our Tailwind config. So we're going to end up extending font family. But before we do that, let's go out to Google Fonts and grab that Lato font. I believe I made a link to this. Probably not here. I think it's in this discussion. Yeah. So we'll find Lato, and this is a really great resource for finding kind of free fonts. But let's see, like regular 400 we can grab. So when you select, you'll see they give you kind of these links you can put in your head tag, and then this would be the font family you would use, so your font stack. So all we need to do is come over here and go into public directory, this index.html, and we'll paste them right here. So this will bring in that font. Now this does require, this is going to make a request out to Google to grab these fonts and everything. You can self-host these. I'm not going to worry about that right now. It's not going to give us a whole lot of benefit. But if you did have like an internal website or something like that that you needed to self-host, you can totally do that. All right, so it's just Lato that we'll end up using. So if we look at Tailwind CSS, the documentation, let's go out there and we're going to search for font family. You'll see there's 3 font classes that get built in, and here's kind of the full font stack. So you've got a sans serif font, serif font, and a monospace font. By default, these use kind of like, I think these are like the system defaults for those. And then you have like just the rest of the stack. So if you don't have these, you'll get Segoe or Roboto or Helvetica or whatever. What we could do is just replace this sans serif font stack with our own. And we might start with that. But if for whatever reason someone couldn't use this Lato font, it would basically fall back to like, I honestly don't know what it'd fall back to, probably Arial or something like that. So the way we would do this is we'd say extend font family, and then this will be an object, and we can say sans and put our Lato in there. Now if we do this and go back, you can see it happened really quick, but this is actually using Lato now. And we can confirm that by going to computed, font family, and there's Lato, right? And if I quickly do this, you can see it kind of go back to whatever that UI sans serif font is or whatever. So this works, and we could go pretty far with this. You can see like the font size changed a little bit. That's why I was saying last night, it's not really worth tuning this too much because we're gonna have to do it again whenever we actually pull in a real font. But let's say, what if we wanted to extend the default font stack and just put Lato at the front of it, otherwise fall back to everything else? So we can do that. I think it's, let's see, theme defaults equals require Tailwind CSS, and then it's either default theme or default config. Let's see what this has in it. I'm gonna roll with this and just see what happens real quick. We may need to use the other, but basically what I want to do is kind of like explode default theme font family, maybe. So this would be, of course we can't like actually go see what the value of this is in the type definition, but I think this will work. So now if I save this and refresh, what is this complaining about? Oh, sans, maybe. Now if we go back and look at that, we see kind of the full font stack now. So there's UI sans serif back in the list. So you can use this to kind of reference values out of the default theme in cases where you're adding to it or whatever. But you can also do kind of what we're doing, which is kind of like extending the default with our own. So we're gonna leave this for now. And now we've got our font here, and this is what we'll kind of stick with for a while. So the first thing we can do is go ahead and knock that off our list. So this is done. Let's hit this header dealio first. We'll do header, this channels list item, and then the rest of the stream will just be focused on the messages UI. So here, let's pull it up again. I'm gonna get my windows arranged where I can have both the code and this pulled up, especially for this. I think what we're gonna do is we'll basically have this breakpoint for now, and then we can do the whole like once it gets bigger, switch it to a center type thing. But all right. There's that. Okay, so we're just going to basically make this top bar up here. So the first thing I need is hero icons. It looked like a clock. We'll go with that. It's funny that these are like, I guess the time's different, but they're very, very, very similar in look and feel. Alright, so our header bar is this chunk up here. And we're going to have kind of, ultimately this will be a unit. Like imagine this square here. And then this is a unit over here. So we'll focus on this one first. So let's say it's a div. Has an icon named clock, width 5, height 5. It's probably gonna be bigger than that. And we'll say flex shrink 0. And our tailwind is very upset with us. We'll reload this real quick because I definitely want the auto completion from the extension. Tailwind's always kind of been bad about like if you make changes to the config while like a watch is running or compiling, it like just loses its mind. There we go. So this is back. Let's close this div, and the next thing looks like a an input field. So it looks like an input field, but really this is like a whole button. You end up opening up this modal that does the rest of it. So what we'll do is just make this a button and style it similarly to this. So we'll say button. We're going to have another icon in here. It's like a magnifying glass. Magnifying, say search. Yeah. Search class. I messed this up. This should be class like that. 5, height 5, flex shrink 0. and we're gonna have a fragment of text. It says search whack chat. All right, so small again. Let's get this bumped up. Let's get this bumped down so we can see everything. All right. Missing in tag. I'm sure we are. I'm sure we are. But where? I've got all the in tags I need, I think. Oh, it must have crashed. All right, we're back, and we got some icons up here. So what we're going to do here is flex align these and start with that. It's going to be white. The text will be white, or like a, what was it, slate 200. That's what we did on some of the others. The other thing we're going to do is this icon's going to be next to the button to begin with. So we'll go ahead and make this flex, item center, and space X2. Put a little space between them. This will be the same text slate 200. All right, so a couple of things. The text needs to be a little bit smaller. And that magnifying glass needs to be a lot smaller. There needs to be a little bit of space between those, and they need to be centered. Maybe it can be a little bit bigger. Yeah, that's good. So now for our button, this is going to be, if we look at like our hover states, or no, the hover states weren't a good example. The buttons are. So you kind of eyeball this. I don't know. The button looks a little bit lighter than these. These were hover BG slate 600. So we'll do like 500 for this, and then 400 for its hover state, and just see how that looks. So here, BG slate 500, hover, BG slate 400. It's probably too light. Let's go back down to 600. Sometimes it's hard to tell. The other thing is, like, if you notice, it's like the difference isn't that great. So there's little tricks we can do to perfect that or whatever. We'll leave it for tonight. So we know we're going to do rounded. We need a little bit of padding. So maybe PY1. It's probably like 0.5. Just like barely there. All right. So that's good. I'm actually curious to inspect this and see a little bit more about how they have their DOM laid out. So this is the button. It's all one thing. Search containers, all one thing. So this is kind of neat. Like, so they've got this flex parent. They've done a sidebar with a fixed width, similar to what we have. I'm curious if we continue to stretch this, what does the DOM do? Is this still a sidebar? It looks like it is. Right? So that's interesting. So what that means is the way they've laid this out is you've actually got a box here that they're just kind of flex justify ending this icon, and then you've got another box here, and it's almost like they've justified between this one and this one. So that's what we'll do too. So it means that this icon we're actually going to put in a div here. And it's going to be widthed similar to our sidebar. So we'll say width 64, flex, justify, end. And we'll have to adjust some padding and all of that, but we can get that lined up. Basically, this is going to need a certain amount of padding to get it to vertically align with the compose button. We need these to be sat next to one another. So now we can go and make this a flex. Let's go with item center. I think that'll get us close to what we want anyway, because we want this to be centered. We want the avatars and stuff to be centered as well. What I don't know is how they got this width on the button. And it could be as easy as they just set a width on it. But you can kind of see, like, if I look at this node, I guess search container, nav bar. It's interesting because these are all siblings to one another. So they're not using flex box per se. Or maybe they are. You could say, like, maybe this is flex, this one has a width, this one has a width, this is flex 1 to fill the space. That's probably what's going on. So let's think about that. Like, this is a flex child with a width. The button, I don't even think needs like a container. We could just say it's flex 1. And then over here will be our avatar and help. We'll just do avatar for right now. I'm not planning on building out a help experience. You know, this cool. That's something interesting with layout though, because we're gonna need this for threads when we implement it. It's like an extra. This isn't like a slide over or something. It's actually in this container. Okay, so let's do the avatar. So just a smidge. So I kind of want to make this width 64. I don't know if it is the same width. Like if we boxed here, this is like 256. This is probably 256. It's a little more. So we'll stick with width 64. It's close enough. And then this is going to be justify end again. We probably don't need the SpaceX yet. If we put more in this div than we would. All right, so we've basically got like a little. So my avatar is actually a square image that just happens to have a circle cat in it. So what we'll do is just focus on making this square image and doing the little dot, the little status indicator here. So to do that, say it's a div, and we'll give it a width and a height. VG white, rounded. We'll just stick with rounded. Although if you look at like these corners, this is rounded, this one's a little bit thicker. This could stand to be a little bit thicker, so we can do rounded medium maybe. And then we'll leave this one rounded. Put some text in here real quick just to see where this is showing up. So it's actually like this whole thing right here. So I may want to make this a little bit smaller. That looks more like what we need. Yeah. All right, so on the parent, we'll set some padding. So padding right 2, maybe. Try 3. Yeah. And I think we'll make this just a smidge smaller. Get rid of the X. So now we need to get the little green dot in there. Easiest way to do that is to probably set one of these as relative. So maybe like the avatar container as relative. What I'm going to do right now is just go ahead and set this one as relative, and then we'll put another div in here that is the status indicator. And it's just going to be like rounded full BG green 600. We'll say padding 1 just to see what that looks like. Width 2, height 2. Yeah, so maybe it's a little bit bigger. And then it's got like a ring around it that matches the background color, the current theme. So before we get around to that ring, we'll say this is absolute position within its parent, and then we'll say bottom 0, right 0. That should get it in the bottom right. And we'll have to play with it a little bit more, because probably what we want is like negative right 1 or 0.5, and then negative bottom 0.5. But now if we throw that ring on there, that'll probably make the rest of the effect. We just have to be careful about it being too thick and wrapping under the bar. So we'll say ring 2, and then ring slate. It's our background 800. So it's a little bit thicker than that. Let's go ring 4. It's probably too thick, but yeah, it's too thick. Let's move 3. All right, we don't have a 3. We don't have a 2.5. I'll just stick with 2, maybe. I don't know. Stick with 2. This is one where I don't want to add another spacing scale just to pull off that. I bet even if we made this a little bit smaller, like we went back to just 2, we might be able to get away with it. The other, say, ring 4. Yeah, I don't know. That looks weird. I wonder what happens if we did like a border slate 800. That's almost spot on. Could probably go back to 2.5. All right. I didn't see a change there, honestly. 2, 4. Oh, geez. All right, let's just stick with that. So that'll be our avatar. This really needs to be kind of a button. So we'll do that. So one thing, kind of note several places, we get all these nice little tooltips. Let's pull in a library to do that real quick so that we don't have to. Oh, that's kind of cool. If it's truncated, it'll show the tooltip. I've never had a channel name this long, so never seen that feature. Oh Lord, we're gonna have to do this Z thing. So like, think about how you do this Z. You could be like, well, the dot is relative. Well, couldn't do relative. That'd be an interesting one to solve. You'd have to have, like, you could do the dot inside of another container, and like the dot lives in the container that is absolute position, but it itself is relative, so that you could put a Z in and pop it to the top right. Unless you wanted to grab like an icon to do this, which you could totally do. But let's get our actually let's do this first. Let's get our spacing right. So on this top left, this looks like padding right, and we'll just do it until it looks right. So 6 maybe, it's too far. 5, it's close enough. It's not exactly centered, but we'll let it go. This needs to be centered, and it needs to be smaller, apparently. So here we can say probably justify center, and then we have text excess. I don't know. The reason I say it needs to be smaller is because it doesn't look like it has. I think it does need to be smaller, but it doesn't have as much padding. So like, what is this? Computed font size is 13. What's this one? It's probably 14. Yeah. Just for funsies, we can try this just to see what it looks like. So like, that is right, but you know, really don't want to be making a bunch of little shitty adjustments like this over and over. But you know, that kind of has the same issue. I don't know. It's a judgment call, because like, yeah, it's just a judgment call. It is kind of a one-off. This would only exist in this one place, so you could just do it. But right now, I'm just going to say it's text small, and we'll just roll it. All right, so we did that. Let's do tooltips now. And once we get the tooltips in for the header, we'll call this done. So I like using a package called ViewTippy, and they have a new version 6 that supports View 3, which is really nice. So while that's going, we can go ahead and bring in ViewTippy, and I think we have to do the @v6. This will be a dev dependency. Let's see, no matching version for ViewTippy @v6. Oh, we have to use next, because we're using npm, not yarn. And I need to run that again and actually save it as a dependency. Alright, so to use this, I usually register it globally, just because I like to smother the app with tippies. But you can bring this in as a component per page or whatever. So anyway, we'll import it here. We will have to get an app instance. So what we can do instead of doing this is say const app equals create app.mount, and then here we'll be able to call it app use and do the rest of those. So app use tippy. I don't want to override the default for the tippy directive. So like, what we'll end up doing is on any element, we'll be able to put v-tippy and then add a content prop that'll have like the contents we want to render there. this default props allow HTML. I'm gonna go ahead and put in there. If you don't do this, it basically escapes the HTML. And you'll see, like, if you had a list in a tooltip or something, you'd see like li, which we don't want. All right, so now back over here, if I wanted this to be like a username or something like that, then all I have to do is say vtippy. My content is whatever the tooltip should be. So now when we save this and I come back over here, I should see something. We might have like an error in our console. We don't. I must have done something wrong. Try restarting this. There it is. So it's there, but it's not styled. So we need to bring in this CSS file here. And you can theme this, do a bunch of other stuff. Just the black tooltips are enough for me. One small detail is if you notice that tooltip, one, it just instantly shows up, but it also, there's like a little bit of a delay on it versus over here, it's instant. I'm curious what the configuration for this is, so that's the only reason I'm gonna go over here and look at it. What we have is fine though. In terms of the background, should be animated, so that like fade in or whatever, we probably don't want for this clone, just because Slack doesn't seem to do that. It just kind of pops in. These right here end up setting these default props for all tippies. However, if we ever did want to animate one, you can put this on the vtippy call. You just pass vtippy an object, a config object that's specific to it. All right. This is, instead of using the content attribute, you can also pass in content as a JavaScript expression. Delay, this is what I want. So show and hide delays are 100 milliseconds. I think it seemed like the show delay was what mattered, but when you go off, it goes away immediately. So like here, let's see. Yeah, it goes away immediately. So let's say like 100 and 0. Or we could do 100 and null. And just see how it feels. So a couple things. It seems like it's still animating a bit. I'll set this to like a second, so we're sure. Okay, so that is working. It just needs to be a little bit higher. And maybe animate fill isn't doing what we think it's doing. Yeah, that feels similar. Search for fade. Animate. Let's see. View tippy disable animation. if I do that? Yeah, there we go. Now this comes in, we go away, it's away. So that's how we do tooltips. And this will do all kinds of fancy stuff, like it controls where the arrow's placed. If, say this avatar, like normally your tooltips are going to be like above whatever you're hovering or focusing. That's controllable, but because this one's at the top and the boundary is the window, it automatically places the tooltip below. So all of that kind of stuff, there's a lot of power there that we're not having to, you know, code or do anything for. It just kind of works. So let's go around. That's history. We'll tag that. Tippy. Just to show kind of how this looks, you can say console or content history, and this does the same thing as that that attribute we did earlier, right? I generally like this a little bit better. I don't know why, but it really doesn't matter. So there's that. Does this do anything? Search select. We'll leave this one off. We're not going to do hotkeys for a minute. Our search gets a, let's see, this should be a button. Give it a vtippy content. New message. Something else about to think about is like here, this is a tooltip that has like, we could probably get away just hacking it together, but it has some special formatting in it or whatever. And this might be one where you pass in HTML to get kind of that look and feel. Okay. So new message, you see it's kind of putting it above where this one does it below. That one does it above. All right. So channel, add channels, section options. All right. I don't know, I think this is pretty good shape. So we'll say we got our header done. Let's add this channels list item. So this should be, if we get onto whack dev, it's going to be very similar. It's just going to have a different icon and a little bit different treatment. So we'll say this is inactive channel. This will be add channels button. Looks like it'll be a plus. Is there like a plus small? There is. And we're gonna want to put this in a div so we can do that that always showing kind of hovery box thing, which doesn't look like it changes whenever we hover it. So we'll say bg slate. What is the background here? And we'll just play with it. We'll guess. It's probably like a, let's say 600. P1 rounded. All right, so that's not quite it. Say P0.5. And then we need to kind of scooch it back the other way a little bit. Let's get the text straight. Add channels. So we can scooch this back by just pulling on the div here is one way. You can also pull on the whole button a little bit. Honestly, don't know if you can do like, say maybe this might be a better way. I'm gonna say close enough. But now if we mouse over, that's good. We'll come back. We want to polish this and make it center at some point, but it's fine. Maybe to get that polished up, we'll go look at their markup and see exactly what they're doing. For all we know, this is actually two divs and they've like right aligned this or something. Okay, so I've actually got to break. I've got to cut the stream for a little bit. Babies woke up, but so I'll be gone for maybe 15-20 minutes, and then when we come back, we'll do this right here and wrap up the stream at that point. All right, I'll be back in a little bit.